When a family breaks, the damage rarely stops there. It moves outward, from child to community to nation. Yet our ancestors understood something we have forgotten. A child was never meant to stand alone. The family was never just a household, it was the to disappear.
Across the globe, birth rates are dropping to record lows. In many developed nations, the single-person household has become the most common living arrangement. We are living through an era of profound social isolation. We usually try to explain this through economics. We blame rising housing costs, the pressures of modern capitalism, or the simple absence of a second parent in the home. But the data shows that people still want to get married. They still want to have children. The desire for connection and family hasn't actually gone away. The problem is that we are looking for a financial solution to a structural failure. We have misidentified a shift in how we define a household as nothing more than a series of unfortunate statistics. For thousands of years, the family was a public, collective unit. It was the primary engine of survival, sharing labor, resources, and protection across generations. Today, that definition has been narrowed. We now view the family as a private arrangement, a contract held together primarily by chemistry and personal happiness. This changes the entire logic of the household. We have moved from asking what we can build together to asking how well another person meets our immediate emotional needs. Long before the state provided a safety net, the homestead did. It was the school, the hospital, and the economic enterprise all at once. Civilization was built by these households, not by individuals. This compares the models. Left, the institutional family relies on interlocking pillars of shared duties. Right, the emotional arrangement depends on a single tether of feelings. Pillars withstand hardship, but a tether snaps when satisfaction dips. Institutions survive what arrangements cannot. Choosing long-term stability over short-term happiness wasn't about being restrictive. Rather, it was a strategy for survival that ensured the next generation had a solid foundation to stand on. The shift toward individualism in the West made the family feel optional. Once personal fulfillment became the goal, the collective requirements of the household began to look burdensome. In South Africa and across the diaspora, the institution was attacked more directly. Colonialism and migrant labor laws physically pulled fathers out of the home, forcing a separation between the family's survival and its physical presence. Even so, these families developed intricate survival networks. They engineered systems of informal adoption, where grandmothers and aunts stepped in to provide stability, ensuring the continuity of the lineage even when the state tried to fragment it. Despite these different histories, the result is the same. The institution is weaker, and the individual now carries the social and economic burdens that the collective once shared. Think of a bridge where the main support beams are starting to give way. The cracks we see in society, poverty, loneliness, and rising crime, are the inevitable results of a weakening foundation. As the family unit retreats, the government is forced to step in. Courts now settle disputes that families once resolved. Schools take on the role of parents, and prison systems become the primary disciplinarians for fatherless young men. We spend billions trying to replace the natural functions of a home with bureaucracy, but the state is an expensive and incomplete substitute for a mother or a father. The more we outsource the duties of the household to the government, the more we realize that a budget cannot replicate the sense of belonging and duty that a family provides. Most discussions ask, how do we save relationships? That is the wrong question. The deeper question is, what is the family for? If we lose the institutional purpose of the home, we lose the primary way we pass down our culture and our identity. People still long for legacy. They still want to be part of a story that began before them and will continue after they're gone. That story requires a return to a collective way of living. Before there can be a nation or a community, there must be a household. And before there can be a future, there must be people willing to build one together.
Right now, society is spending billions of dollars trying to solve the housing crisis. And the loneliness epidemic.
Yeah.
And, failing schools.
Oh, yeah. Billions. Easily.
Right. And we treat them as these three completely separate crises. Like, we have task forces for affordable housing, and then mental health initiatives for isolation, and
endless debates over education reform.
Exactly. But what if those aren't actually three different problems? What if they are all just symptoms of a single institution collapsing right under our noses?
I mean, it completely changes the entire paradigm of how we view the modern world.
It really does.
We spend so much time putting out these localized fires, and we just fail to notice that the structural foundation of the entire city has given way.
Yeah, and for you listening right now, that structural foundation is exactly what we are dissecting today. You're here because you want to move past the surface level news cycle, right?
Mhm.
You want to understand the actual tectonic shifts driving those headlines.
Which is why today's deep dive is so crucial.
Exactly. So today's mission is to examine this fascinating piece of analytical source material that really just upends everything we think we know about the modern family crisis. And actually, if you're watching the video version of this deep dive, you'll see the backdrop we set up today.
Yeah, the visual transitions.
Right, transitioning from imagery of like ancient village hearths to these modern, totally isolated apartment windows glowing in the dark. It really sets the civilizational scale we're talking about here.
It really does capture the mood, because usually when we hear about the breakdown of the family, the blame gets pinned on poverty, right? Or modern capitalism.
Or absent fathers. That's a huge one you hear.
Yeah, absent fathers,
Yeah.
which, according to the source document we are looking at, is a fundamental misdiagnosis.
Wait, a misdiagnosis.
Yeah. The text argues that poverty or absent parents are just expressions of the crisis. They aren't the root cause. The actual disease is much more profound, and it operates on this massive civilizational scale.
Okay.
The core thesis is this: humanity basically no longer understands the family as an institution.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I want to stop and look at that word specifically, institution.
Yeah, it's a heavy word.
It is. And I think most of us hear family, and we immediately think of a private, emotional bond. Like we picture Thanksgiving dinners or, a couple holding hands in the park.
Right, the Hallmark card version.
Exactly. So to understand the gravity of this crisis, we have to rewind the clock. We need to look at how pre-industrial humans actually lived. Like, how did a historical household function in a way that made it an actual institution?
Well, think about it sequentially. Long before there were formal governments, there were households. Before there were schools or any kind of formal education systems, there were parents and kinship networks. And before massive corporations existed,
Almost all economic production happened within the family enterprise.
exactly. The historical baseline is that the family was a self-sustaining microeconomy. It was a farm, a workshop, a hospital, and a welfare system, all literally rolled into one.
Meaning the members of that household were, literally dependent on one another for physical survival.
Survival, yeah. But also civilization building. The family was where society reproduced itself, not just biologically, but culturally,
Yeah, passing down trades and values.
Social order, all of it. Because of that immense weight, the central question driving a marriage or a family used to be outwardly focused. The question was, what are we building together?
Okay, but I have to push back here for a second, because framing it that way makes the historical family sound incredibly transactional, almost bleak, honestly.
Bleak how?
Well, isn't it a massive leap forward that we now choose partners based on love and compatibility rather than just survival economics?
Oh, absolutely.
We view family today as a sanctuary from the world. It's an emotional arrangement. We prioritize chemistry, personal happiness, finding a full mate. I mean, are we really arguing that emotional fulfillment is a bad thing?
No, not at all. And the source material is very careful to clarify that wanting emotional fulfillment is completely natural. The danger isn't the presence of love.
Okay, then what's the danger?
The danger is the shift in the load-bearing pillars of the relationship. When the driving question changes from, what are we building together, to, how do you make me feel? Well, the entire center of gravity moves.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. You transition from an external shared mission to an internal individual evaluation.
Which fundamentally alters the fragility of the bond.
Exactly, because institutions are specifically designed to survive difficult emotions. If you're building a farm together and you have a terrible fight with your spouse,
Which happens.
right, or you go through a period of deep resentment, the institution survives because the harvest still has to come in.
The children still need to be fed.
Yes. The shared mission holds the structure together when the feelings fail. Emotional arrangements just do not have that infrastructure.
Oh, wow. Okay, think of it like the difference between founding a startup company versus joining a local book club.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Like a startup is an institution. You stay through the grueling times, the sleepless nights, those moments when you might literally resent your co-founders.
Because you are building a future.
Right. The mission demands your endurance. But a book club is an emotional arrangement based on shared enjoyment and compatibility. The second it stops being fun, or, the moment the book selection doesn't meet your personal needs,
You leave.
you leave. There is no underlying infrastructure demanding that you stay.
That conceptualizes the shift perfectly. When society transforms the family from a startup into a book club, you strip away the structural integrity. You lose the framework that allows people to weather the inevitable storms of human existence.
Because the primary purpose is just making you feel happy.
Right. And when that purpose is no longer being met, the arrangement dissolves.
If that's the case, it actually explains a massive paradox in modern sociology.
Let's hear it.
Well, if our modern goal is to maximize romantic love and personal fulfillment, you would think we'd be living in this golden age of happy relationships. But the data shows the exact opposite.
Completely the opposite.
We're seeing plummeting marriage rates. Birth rates are falling below replacement levels across basically the entire developed world.
And the spike in single-person households?
Yes,
Yeah.
a staggering spike. Plus, children being raised outside of stable structures.
Now, the traditional sociological approach treats each of those statistics as an independent problem to be solved. Like, we treat falling birth rates as this macroeconomic crisis that needs, tax incentives.
Right. And we treat rising divorce rates as a psychological issue requiring better couples therapy.
Exactly. We treat the loneliness epidemic as a public health issue.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. The source uses this analogy of a bridge. It's like standing on a suspension bridge that was designed to hold a certain amount of weight, and suddenly a steel cable snaps on the left side.
And then a concrete pillar cracks on the right.
Right. Then the roadway buckles in the middle. The standard response is to run around and put a patch on the concrete or try to weld the single cable.
But the localized cracks aren't the primary problem.
Exactly.
If we connected this to the bigger picture, they are the evidence of a failing structural integrity. The bridge is buckling because the structural materials themselves have been swapped out.
We've replaced the steel beams.
We've replaced the steel beams of an institutional family with the fragile threads of an emotional arrangement. And those threads simply cannot bear the weight of human society.
So the decline in marriage and the drop in fertility are just expressions of that same underlying reality.
Precisely. People intuitively know that an emotional arrangement is too fragile a foundation upon which to build a lifelong micro-civilization or raise children.
Okay, but that raises a massive complex question. Because human history isn't a monolith, right? We have wildly different cultures, completely different political systems, totally different historical traumas.
We do.
So if the family is failing as an institution, does that failure look identical across the globe? Or is this just like a wealthy Western phenomenon?
This is where the analytical text provides its most compelling evidence. It zooms out to look at three completely different historical paths.
Okay.
We are talking about three distinct worlds with radically different histories, but they all converge on the exact same destination, the hollowing out of the household.
Let's get into the mechanics of that, because the contrast is stark. The first path it highlights is the West. And here, the mechanism of destruction was primarily philosophical and economic.
Starting with the Industrial Revolution.
Right.
Because the Industrial Revolution fundamentally physically separated work from home. For the first time in human history, economic production moved to the factory.
Leaving the household is purely a place of rest and consumption.
Exactly, which paved the way for profound individualism. If the household is no longer an economic necessity, the individual becomes the primary unit of society. Family basically becomes optional.
So marriage shifts from a societal building block to a mechanism for personal self-actualization. And having children goes from being a necessity for survival to being this heavily weighed lifestyle choice.
A choice you only opt into if it aligns with your personal emotional goals. That is the Western path. The institution weakened from within by a philosophical shift toward the self.
Okay, but now contrast that with the second path the text outlines, South Africa.
Yes.
In South Africa, the family wasn't dismantled by philosophical individualism. It was physically and systematically broken by profound labor disruption and the policies of apartheid.
And the mechanics of this are devastating to read about. It wasn't a slow cultural drift. It was the intentional implementation of a migrant labor system designed to extract wealth.
Right. Under this system, able-bodied men were structurally forced to leave their families in rural areas. They had to live in single-sex mining hostels in urban centers like Johannesburg for, 11 months out of the year?
Yeah, 11 months. You literally cannot maintain the family as an institution under those physical conditions. You have removed a primary load-bearing pillar of the household for 90% of the year.
The shared mission is completely destroyed because physical survival requires separation.
Exactly. The economic policies of apartheid created a reality where the household could no longer function as an economic or social unit. It was an external, systemic force breaking the institution apart.
Which is so different from the Western path.
Completely different. And this brings us to the third path the source examines, the African diaspora. Here, the institution was weakened through even more brutal historical fragmentation.
We're talking about the multi-generational trauma of slavery. The forced displacement of millions of people where marriage was not even legally recognized.
Where children could be systematically sold away from their parents.
Yeah, and where generational continuity was intentionally severed to maintain control over an enslaved population.
It is the ultimate forced instability. The enslaved household was intentionally denied the right to function as an institution. So we have three historical wounds:
Individualism in the West.
extractive migrant labor and apartheid in South Africa.
And the violent fragmentation of slavery in the diaspora. If you look at those three completely different mechanisms, a philosophical shift, an economic policy, and literal enslavement, they are totally distinct.
Very distinct.
Yet they all result in the exact same structural collapse. What does that actually tell us about the nature of the institution itself? If these three completely different historical wounds all result in individuals having to carry burdens that were once carried collectively, what happens when those individuals buckle?
Well, it tells us that regardless of how the structural pillars are removed, whether they are willingly discarded in the pursuit of individualism or violently ripped away by systemic oppression, the physics of the collapse are identical.
The physics remain the same.
Exactly. When the foundational institution weakens, a massive societal vacuum is created. Now, it is crucial to note the unbelievable resilience of human bonds here.
Right.
In both South Africa and the African diaspora, communities developed remarkable survival systems. Extended kinship networks, fictive kin, and community care stepped in to ensure survival. People still loved each other fiercely.
But the source material draws a hard line between the survival of love and the survival of the institution.
It does.
Like, a grandmother raising 3 grandchildren out of sheer necessity and love is heroic. But sociologically, it is still the result of a fractured institutional structure.
Yeah.
And that vacuum you mentioned, society abhors a vacuum.
Yes, it does.
If the household is no longer functioning as a self-contained micro-civilization, the macro-civilization has to absorb its duties.
And what's fascinating here is this concept of invisible costs. It is perhaps the most tangible part of the entire analysis. We rarely think about the macroeconomy in these terms, but there is an immense transfer of responsibility happening around us every single day.
Let's move away from abstract sociology for a second and look at exactly what happens when the family stops doing the heavy lifting. Take the education system.
Oh, okay.
Historically, a school was designed to teach academics, math, reading, science. But today, because the family institution has weakened, schools have inherited foundational parental responsibilities.
Ask literally any modern educator. Teachers are no longer just delivering lesson plans. They are spending vast amounts of their day teaching basic socialization,
Conflict resolution.
impulse control, emotional regulation. They are essentially forced to build the psychological foundation that used to be constructed at the village hearth.
You simply cannot expect a teacher to manage the emotional dysregulation of 30 students when that foundational work wasn't done in a functional household. It burns the teachers out and it degrades the academic environment.
And the transfer doesn't stop at schools. Look at how we handle aging and wisdom.
Oh, that's a big one.
Historically, if you were in crisis, or if elder members of the community needed care, the kinship network absorbed that. You went to your aunts, your uncles, your grandparents.
Today, therapists and paid care workers have inherited those elder responsibilities. We literally outsource the role of the village elder to an hourly rate.
The state becomes the ultimate backup generator. Courts inherit community dispute responsibilities. Prisons inherit the consequences of absent fathers and fractured discipline.
Welfare systems attempt to replace the economic safety net that used to be woven by extended family.
What society is attempting to do is engineer a bureaucratic replacement for the human family. And we spend literally trillions of dollars globally trying to do it, but here is the stark reality the source highlights.
Yeah.
A bureaucracy can never fully replace a biology. A state welfare check can keep someone from starving, but it cannot replace the emotional and social grounding of an intact kinship network.
Right.
A well-funded prison rehabilitation program cannot replace the guiding daily presence of a father.
And a school counselor cannot replace the unconditional devotion of a parent. It's a sobering realization. And I really want to bring this directly back to you, the listener, because none of this is just theoretical.
Not at all.
When you look at your own local tax bill, when you see teachers going on strike because they are completely overwhelmed, or when you read about the backlog in family court systems, you are looking at the itemized receipt for these invisible costs.
You're looking at the physical, financial manifestation of the family institution weakening.
So what does this all mean? Knowing all of this, knowing that we've replaced steel beams with book club emotions, and that society is buckling under the transferred weight, where does the source material suggest we actually go from here?
It demands that we completely change the questions we are asking. Most modern debates and most of our cultural energy are obsessed with the question, how do we save relationships?
Which just reinforces the emotional arrangement model. It assumes the goal is just keeping two people happy.
Exactly. The much deeper civilizational question we should be asking is, what is the family for?
Wow.
If a society does not know the fundamental purpose of a household, it cannot possibly know how to repair it. A society that forgets the institutional purpose of the family will eventually lose its community cohesion.
It will lose its cultural continuity.
It will lose its ability to sustain itself economically, and ultimately it will lose its sense of nationhood.
It's a profound synthesis, really. People aren't giving up on family because they've stopped wanting connection. We are human beings. We still desperately want to belong to something. We still want to leave a legacy.
The true crisis is that we simply no longer agree on what a family actually is.
We've collectively forgotten the definition. And until we answer that fundamental question, until we agree on what a family is actually for, all those statistics will just keep trending in the wrong direction. Because before you can build a stable economy or a thriving nation or a coherent future, you need people who are willing to build a functional household together.
We live in a society defined by explicit purposes. If you look closely, almost everything else we interact with has a meticulously defined goal and structure.
And that is exactly the thought I want to leave you with today. Think about every major institution in your daily life right now. Think about your workplace, your local city government, your university, or even like a local charity.
They all have clear, written charters.
Right. They have mission statements defining their exact purpose, their specific goals, and how they plan to endure when things get difficult. They know exactly what they're building. But what about the institution that started it all?
The household.
If you had to sit down tonight, look at the people you live with, and write a mission statement for your modern household, what would it actually say? Would it just be a fluid list of personal emotional preferences and compatibility requirements? Or would it be a resilient blueprint for a micro-civilization? Because whether society's bridge holds up or collapses might entirely depend on your answer.